He ordered a bride by contract, but when the wagon door opened, it was the sister no one had planned for. So why didn't he send her away? The wagon jolts to a stop, wood creaking, dust rising into the late afternoon light. A boot steps down, wrong color, wrong dress, and the murmurs start, low and sharp. Jonah doesn't move. His fingers tighten once on the rail as she stands there alone, gripping a worn cloth bag, eyes steady despite the silence pressing in. Somewhere behind him, a chair scrapes. The driver won't meet his gaze, and still, he steps forward. What kind of man takes what was never meant for him? Stay with me. This story might linger longer than you expect. The wind moved first. It dragged dust across the main road of Dry Creek, thin and restless, slipping between boots and wagon wheels, rattling loose boards along the storefronts. Folks had already gathered by the time the stagecoach came into view. No one said much, just a few men leaning on posts, a woman standing in the doorway of the general store, apron still tied at her waist. Jonah Walker stood apart from them. He had taken his place near the hitching rail without thinking about it, hat low, one hand resting on the worn leather strap of his glove. His coat was clean but old, same as everything he owned. He didn't shift when the coach slowed, didn't step forward when it stopped. The driver climbed down first, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, and glanced toward Jonah like a man hoping not to be noticed. Then the door opened. A boot appeared. Not polished, dust-stained. Then a hand on the frame. Small, steady. She stepped down without help. For a second, no one moved. Not even the horses. Jonah's eyes stayed on her dark dress, travel-worn, a single bag held tight in her hand. No lace, no bright ribbon, nothing like the girl described in the letter he had folded in his pocket. The driver cleared his throat. "There's been a change," he said, not looking at anyone in particular. A chair scraped somewhere behind Jonah. Someone muttered under their breath. It didn't rise to laughter, just a sound people make when something doesn't fit right. Jonah didn't answer. The woman stood where the coach had left her, chin level, shoulders straight, like she had already decided how this moment would go and would not let it bend her. "Name?" Jonah asked after a long second. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the bag. Lila Bennett. That wasn't the name in the letter. Jonah let that sit between them. The driver shifted again. Family said she'd take her sister's place. Papers still stand. That's what I was told. Jonah looked past him out toward the empty stretch of road the coach had come from. Nothing there now but dust settling back into itself. "No return?" he asked. The driver shook his head. "Paid one way. That was that." Jonah reached into his coat, pulled the folded paper free and opened it just enough to see the name written there. Clara Bennett. Promised. Agreed upon. Witnessed. He folded it back up. Behind him, the quiet shifted. Not louder, just heavier. Eyes waiting to see what kind of man he was going to be. Lila didn't speak again. She didn't plead, didn't explain. Just stood there with the wind pulling loose strands of hair at her temples, the hem of her dress brushing dust. Jonah stepped forward. He stopped a few feet from Hishaho, close enough to see the lines of travel on her face, the way her grip on the bag had gone white at the knuckles. "You know this wasn't the arrangement," he said. "I do. You got somewhere else to go?" A pause. "Not long. Just long enough." "No." The word didn't break. It settled. Jonah looked at her a moment longer than most men would have. Then he turned, took her bag without asking, and started toward the hitching rail. "You came this far," he said, not looking back. "You don't go back." There was a shift behind him, a low murmur. Someone spat into the dirt. He untied his horse, checked the strap once, then handed the reins up. Lila didn't move at first. Then she stepped forward, slow, careful, like testing ground she wasn't sure would hold. She took the reins. Her hand brushed his for the briefest second. Cold. Jonah mounted after her, settling in behind, not too close, not touching more than needed. He turned the horse toward the open road. No one stopped them, but the silence followed. They rode out past the last of the buildings, past the split fence and the dry well, until Dry Creek fell behind them and the land opened up into long stretches of rock and pale grass. The wind picked up again. Lila kept her eyes forward. Jonah didn't ask her anything else, and somewhere between the town and the ridge ahead, something quiet and unspoken took root, like a line drawn in the dirt that neither of them crossed, but neither of them turned away from either. The horse moved steady beneath them. The road stretched on, and behind them, the town kept watching, even after they were gone. By the time the sun dipped low behind the ridge, the land had turned a dull gold. Dry grass bent under the wind. Fence posts leaned where they had stood too long without care. Jonah slowed the horse as they reached the edge of his land. There was no sign, just a narrow gate hanging crooked on one hinge, a stretch of pasture beyond it, broken in places where cattle had pushed through. Farther back, the house stood alone. Wood darkened by years of weather. Smoke curled faint from the chimney. Lila slid down first this time. She didn't wait for help, just steadied herself, one hand on the saddle, then stepped back. Her boots sank slightly into the dust. She looked at the house, then the yard, taking it in without a word. Jonah untied the rope and led the horse through the gate. It scraped against the ground with a dry sound. "You'll want the room off the kitchen," he said. "Door sticks. Lift it when you open." That was all. Inside, the house held the smell of coffee gone cold, and wood smoke soaked into the walls. A tin cup sat near the stove, a plate left clean but not put away. Lila set her bag by the doorway. Her fingers lingered on it a moment, then let go. A small sound came from the back room. Jonah didn't turn. "Noah!" he called. There was a pause. Then a boy stepped into the doorway. 9 years old, maybe, thin in the arms, but his shoulders already set like someone older. He looked at Lila without blinking, not curious, just measuring. "This is Lila," Jonah said. The boy's eyes shifted to his father, then back again. Lila gave a small nod. "Hello?" Noah didn't answer. He leaned against the frame, one foot hooked behind the other, then pushed off and disappeared back into the room. The screen door creaked in the wind. Jonah moved past her, poured water into a basin, and set it near the stove. "Supper's at 6, he said. "You eat when you're ready." He stepped outside again before she could respond. Lila stood alone in the kitchen. The room was neat in a way that came from habit, not care. Everything in its place, but nothing softened. No cloth on the table. No extra chair pulled close. She crossed to the window. The glass was slightly warped, bending the view of the yard. Jonah stood by the fence, checking a loose board with slow, steady hands. Lila turned back to the stove. There was flour in a tin, beans in a sack. She worked quietly, sleeves rolled back, fingers moving without hesitation, even when she had to stop and think. The first batch of cornbread came out too dark. She set it aside without a sound and started again. When Jonah came in, he paused near the door. The smell had reached him already. He set his hat on the hook and washed his hands. Water dripped into the basin, steady and loud in the quiet. Noah came out when the plates were set. They sat without speaking. The spoon against the bowl made a small, hollow sound. Wind pressed against the walls, then eased. Halfway through, Noah stopped eating. He looked at Lila, then nudged his plate a little closer to her side of the table, not offering, not asking, just moving it there. She glanced at him, then at the plate. She didn't touch it. Jonah saw it. Said nothing. After the meal, Lila gathered the dishes. The water in the basin had gone cool. She washed them one by one, setting them to dry near the window. Jonah stepped out again. Night had already begun to settle. When he came back in, the kitchen was quiet. A pair of new work gloves lay on the table. He didn't look at her when he set them down. Just moved past, took his cup, and sat. Lila dried her hands slowly. She picked up the gloves, turned them over once. The leather was stiff but clean, untouched. She set them beside her bag. Noah watched from the doorway again. This time he didn't leave right away. The house held the same silence as before, but it wasn't quite empty anymore. Morning came early in Dry Creek country. The cold settled in before the sun cleared the ridge, leaving a thin frost along the fence wire. Jonah was already out by the well, pulling water up slow and steady, the rope creaking against the wood. Lila stepped onto the porch with the gloves in her hand. She paused there, watching him. Not long, just enough to see the rhythm of his work. Then she came down the steps and took the second bucket without asking. He didn't look at her, just shifted his stance to give her room. They worked like that. No instructions, no praise, just small adjustments, each of them moving around the other without crossing into the same space. By midday, the frost had lifted. Jonah saddled the horse and handed Noah a small folded paper. "Take this to town, Mr. Harlan's store. Get what's listed." Noah nodded, tucking it into his coat. Lila wiped her hands on her apron. "He goes alone? He knows the road." That was the end of it. The boy rode out just past noon. The wind carried the sound of hooves until it didn't anymore. He came back near dusk, slower this time. Jonah saw it first, the way Noah held himself in the saddle, too stiff, too careful. By the time the boy reached the yard, one sleeve was torn. Dust streaked his cheek. There was a mark along his jaw, already darkening. Jonah didn't raise his voice. "Fall?" Noah shook his head. Silence stretched. Lila stepped forward, not close, just enough to see the bruise clearly. Her eyes moved once, from the boy to the road behind him. No one followed. "What happened?" she asked. Noah kept his gaze on the ground. "Nothing." Jonah took the reins, tied them off, then reached up and lifted the boy down. Gentle, but firm. Inside, he set Noah on the chair by the table, pulled a clean cloth from the shelf, dipped it in water. The boy flinched when it touched his face. "Hold still," Jonah said. The words were quiet, not sharp. After a moment, Noah spoke. They said, "You made a bad trade." Jonah's hand didn't stop. "They said you took what nobody else would." The cloth moved once more along the bruise. "And you hit them?" Jonah asked. Noah didn't answer. That was answer enough. Lila turned away, walked to the stove, and set a pot on the fire. The flame caught slow. The room filled with the faint smell of smoke and iron. No one spoke again during supper. That night, the wind came harder. It pressed against the walls, found its way through the cracks, rattled the loose hinge on the back door. The lamp flickered on the table, light shifting across the wood. Lila stood in the small room off the kitchen. Her bag lay open on the bed. She folded the dress she had worn into town, the one she hadn't taken off until the dust had settled into it. Set it inside. Then the gloves. then the small cloth bundle she had carried from the start. Her movements were steady. No hesitation. She tied the bag closed. Outside, a board struck the side of the house with each gust. Jonah stepped in from the yard, brushing dust from his coat. He stopped when he saw the bag. Didn't ask right away. "You leaving?" Lila lifted her chin slightly. "Before morning." The lamp flickered again. "No need to make it worse for you," she said. "They'll stop talking if I'm gone." Jonah set his hat down slow. "They'll talk about something else. That won't follow you." He looked at her then. Really looked. The room felt smaller for it. "You think I brought you here to send you off quiet?" he asked. Lila's fingers tightened on the edge of the bag. "I think you didn't know what you were bringing." Wind hit the door hard enough to make it jump in the frame. Jonah crossed the room in 2 steps and set his hand on the door before it could swing again. "You don't leave because they talk," he said. She didn't move. "I was never meant to stay anywhere," she said, softer now. "Not broken, just certain." The lamp hissed. Jonah's hand stayed on the door. "Then stay here," he said, "and prove that wrong." Silence filled the space between them. Not empty this time. Just waiting. Lila looked at the door, at his hand holding it closed against the wind, then at the bag resting on the bed. She didn't untie it, but she didn't pick it up again either. Outside, the wind kept blowing. Inside, nothing else moved. Morning came gray, the kind that didn't rise so much as settle. Low clouds pressed over the ridge. The air held damp and cold, like something waiting. Jonah was already gone. Lila found the door unlatched and the yard empty except for the trough and the old post by the gate. A bucket leaned against it, half full, water still. She stepped out, wrapped her shawl tighter, and crossed the yard. Her boots left shallow prints in the dirt. The ground had softened overnight. Something caught her eye near the barn. The door stood open. That hadn't been the case the night before. Lila moved toward it, slow, one hand brushing along the wood as she passed. The hinge creaked when she pushed it wider. Inside, the light fell in narrow strips through the slats. Tools lined one wall, rope, a broken harness, a crate with old nails. And near the back, a small table. Not part of the barn. Something brought in and set aside. Papers lay on it. She hesitated, then stepped closer. The top page had a seal she didn't recognize. Heavy ink, clean lines, not the kind used for simple bills or feed orders. Her fingers hovered before touching it. A name stood out. Jonah Walker. Below it, another line. Cheyenne Land Office. She read slower after that. Words she didn't use every day, but understood enough. Property claims, water rights, disputes filed and withdrawn. One name repeated more than once. Calvin Price. Her hand stilled. There were other pages beneath. Older, folded and refolded, one corner worn thin. She didn't open those. Footsteps sounded outside. Not rushed, not quiet either, just steady. Lila set the paper back where it had been. Jonah stepped into the doorway. He stopped when he saw her there. His eyes moved once from her face to the table behind her, then back. Neither of them spoke right away. The wind pressed through the cracks, lifting the edge of one loose sheet. Lila stepped aside. She didn't hide that she had been reading, just moved enough to give him the space. "You worked for them," she said. Jonah's jaw shifted once. "Used to." She nodded, slow. "And him." A beat. "He came after the land?" Jonah walked past her, picked up the paper, and folded it once. Careful, like it mattered. He came after everything that had a line drawn on it, he said. And you stopped him. Jonah set the paper down again. For a while. Lila looked at him. You don't fight now. The words weren't sharp, just plain. Jonah let out a breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh. I stopped fighting, he said, because I had no one worth it. The barn settled around them. Wood creaked. A loose chain tapped against the post. Lila didn't answer. She stepped past him and out into the yard. The sky hadn't cleared. By midday, Jonah had the saddle on again. He checked the straps twice, tightened them once more. His movements were slower than usual. Lila came down the steps. She had changed into the darker dress, the one that didn't catch on nails or fence wire as easily. Jonah glanced up. You don't need to come. She stopped a few feet from him. I know. That was all she said. He studied her for a second, then nodded once. They rode together, not touching, not speaking much. The road into Dry Creek felt shorter this time. Word had already spread. They could feel it before they saw it. Men outside the store paused mid-conversation. A woman turned her back, then turned again, as if she hadn't meant to. The meeting was already gathering near the well, a long table set out, papers weighed down with stones. Calvin Price stood at the far end, coat clean, boots polished. He didn't look at Jonah right away, but he saw Lila. That much showed. Walker, he said finally, you took your time. Jonah dismounted, helped Lila down without thinking. His hand stayed a moment longer than needed, then dropped. Didn't figure you were going anywhere, Jonah said. A few men shifted. Calvin's gaze moved between them. You bring her to speak for you? He asked. No one laughed. Jonah stepped forward. I came to settle the water line. Calvin tapped the paper on the table. Already settled. You lost it when you stopped filing. Jonah didn't reach for the paper. Lila stepped closer instead. Not in front of him. Not behind. Beside. Her hand rested on the edge of the table. Not gripping. Just there. Calvin's eyes flicked to it, then to her. You talk about worth, Jonah said, voice steady. I chose mine. The words carried. Not loud, but they held. Lila didn't lower her gaze. The wind shifted, lifting dust across the ground between them. No one moved to stop it. No one spoke either. For the first time since they had arrived, the town didn't sound like anything at all, just the wind, and the space between what had been said and what would come next. No one spoke first. Calvin Price let out a breath through his nose, slow and measured, like a man deciding whether something was worth the trouble. He looked at Jonah, then at Lila's hand resting steady on the table. Waterline stands, he said at last. For now. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a loss. He gathered the papers, tapped them once against the wood, and turned away. The men around him shifted, some following, some staying where they were, unsure what had just happened. The crowd didn't laugh. That was new. Jonah didn't move until the last of them stepped back. Then he picked up the paper nearest him, glanced at it once and folded it into his coat. Lila withdrew her hand. Not quickly. Just enough. They walked back to the horses without hurry. No one stopped them. The ride home was quieter than before. The wind had eased. The sky broke in places, pale light slipping through. Dust settled behind them instead of rising. Jonah held the reins loose. Lila sat steady in front of him, her back straight, shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't been before. Halfway up the ridge, he slowed the horse. Not for the road, just slowed. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know." A pause. "You still did." She looked out over the land, dry grass moving in long waves, fence lines stretching where they could, breaking where they couldn't. "You didn't ask me to stay," she said. "Not really." Jonah's hand tightened once on the reins. "No." Another stretch of quiet. Lila nodded, more to herself than to him. That made it easier. He didn't answer that. They kept riding. Days passed, not all at once, just one after another. Morning frost turned to soft mud. The gate got fixed. The hinge stopped dragging. A board along the side of the house was replaced without anyone saying when it had broken. Noah came in one afternoon with a split piece of wood and set it by the stove. "Can you show me how to make it even?" he asked. He didn't look at Jonah. Lila took the knife from the shelf, turned the wood in her hands, showed him where to press, where to ease. He stayed longer than he needed. That night, he said, "Thank you," without being told. Jonah heard it, didn't comment. The old storage shed out back was cleaned one morning. No plan spoken. Just Lila carrying out broken crates, dust rising around her boots. Jonah hauling out a rusted barrel. Noah dragging a bench across the yard, breath short but steady. By afternoon, light reached the back wall for the first time in years. A table was set inside. Rough, uneven, but level enough. A piece of chalk appeared on the edge. No one asked where it came from. Late one evening, Lila stepped out onto the porch. The air had turned cooler again, a different kind of cold, one that stayed. Jonah sat on the step below, hat in his hands. He didn't look up right away. "Water held today," he said. "Didn't drop." "That's good." Another pause. He turned the hat once, then set it beside him. "You could have left," he said. "I know, you didn't." She stepped down beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I wasn't sent here to stay," she said. "No." "But I stayed anyway." Jonah nodded once. The sky stretched wide above them. No clouds, just the first hint of stars breaking through. After a moment, he lifted his hand. Not reaching, just offering. Lila looked at it, then placed her hand in his. No rush, no hesitation, just the weight of it. They sat like that as the light faded, not saying anything more. They didn't need to. Behind them, the house stood quiet but lived in. Ahead, the land held steady, and between the two of them, something that hadn't been there before finally settled into place. Not chosen for them, chosen by them, and held. If you stand there long enough, on that quiet porch, with the wind moving through the grass and the last light fading, you start to feel it. Not the noise of what was said back in town, not the weight of what others decided you were worth, just the steady presence of someone who stayed. Maybe you've known a moment like that, a place where you could have walked away, where it would have been easier to disappear, to let the world keep talking and never answer back. But something or someone gave you a reason to remain. Not out of pride, not out of obligation, but because for once you were seen clearly and not turned away. That kind of choice doesn't come loud. It doesn't need witnesses. It shows up in small things. A hand offered without demand. A door left open. A voice that doesn't ask you to be less than you are. And maybe that's the truth this story leaves behind. that a life doesn't begin when everything is perfect. It begins the moment you decide to stay, and someone decides to stand beside you. If this story found a place in you, I'd like to hear it. Tell me where you're listening from, or what part stayed with you the longest. There are more stories out there like this one. Quiet, stubborn, full of people who kept going when no one was watching. And if you feel like walking a little further down that road, you're always welcome to come along.